Good day, and thank you for joining us for our Healthy Minds speaker series. It's great to have you with us today. I've been looking forward to this session for a while. The title of the session is Finding Calm in the Chaos, and I don't think there's one of us who over the last while hasn't felt like our life has been a bit chaotic, and we're trusting today is going to help move the needle and give you some tools to address that. The topic today is going to be on mindfulness. And mindfulness is one of those topics that you may not have actually associated with kind of certainly doing at a work-related event. But as we've been learning over the past number of weeks, mindfulness has become a really important tool for people to have to be able to learn how to kind of regulate the emotions that they're experiencing, to focus on their breathing. And each of the professionals that we've had come in have talked about the irrefutable scientific evidence that it really makes a difference. So really excited to have you join us here today. A reminder again in terms of the process is that we'll be having a 15-minute presentation, and then we'll be going into 15 minutes of Q&A. If you have any questions, there's the icon in the top right corner, so just click on that anytime and we'll be moderating the questions. As a way of introduction, I'm Peter Neufeld and part of the HR team here. Joining us here today is Dr. Bill Howitt. Dr. Howitt, good to see you again.
Hi.
And also our guest speaker, Colin de France. And Colin, thank you so much for joining us. We're very, very interested in learning what you have to share. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Colin, and we'll take it from there.
All right. Thanks for the introduction, Peter. I'm very grateful and honored to be able to present this week's segment, Finding Calm in the Chaos. And hopefully before we're done, I can inspire you all to begin a daily practice of your own. But before we launch right into it, I'll just make a comment that quite some time ago, I actually spent a fair amount of my time in the food industry as a corporate quality assurance manager. Spent a lot of time down in the food plants of a number of different divisions. And so I'm quite familiar with some of the situations I'm sure that many of the people at Maple Leaf are going through right now, particularly down at the plant level. So moving on then, these past few months, if we could we get the next slide, thanks. The past few months really have been nothing short of extraordinary. As a result of COVID-19, we've all been experiencing a little disruption in our lives. And every one of us on this call, I'm sure, has been impacted in some way. And for many, it's resulted in increased pressure, worry, anxiety, and stress. And it's no surprise, really, that one of the greatest health concerns coming out of this situation is the impact that it's having on our overall mental health and well-being. Now, if I were to share any good news about this, it's that many organizations like Maple Leaf Foods are now looking to the many ways that they can support their employees, with mindfulness being one of them. Next slide. So normally, when I do a live introductory session, I always ask a few simple questions and for show of hands. But given our virtual venue that we have here today, I'll simply share what would be some of the typical responses. So if I were to ask, for example, how many of you know what mindfulness is? About half of you would raise your hands. If I were to ask how many of you regularly practice some form of mindfulness, this number would drop to only about 5%. Now, if I were to change it up and say how many of you have ever threaded a needle, or maybe thrown a frisbee, tried skipping a rope, enjoyed doing a jigsaw puzzle, playing golf, darts, or even a game of pool, then all of you pretty much would be putting up your hands. And the truth of the matter is that mindfulness is not some esoteric practice of Tibetan monks living high up in a mountain cave. And all of the activities I just mentioned have one thing in common, and that is that they require the application of some degree of mindfulness in order to do them. So what then exactly is mindfulness? And I'm going to just give you the simple definition, which is that it's about being present. And this is something that's a lot easier said than done, more times than not. There's a lot of research out there today that confirms that mindfulness has all kinds of benefits. Among these, it's known to promote well-being, strengthen resilience, drive focus and clarity, and also to relieve any feelings of depression and anxiety. So what then do we mean by being present? And why does this even matter to us? Well, research suggests that we're only engaged in the present moment about 50% of the time. And although our body is physically in the present, our minds typically are not. We're often thinking about something that's already happened, or we're thinking about some event that is yet to come. Now, this is perfectly fine when it serves you, like thinking about a positive memory that uplifts your spirits, or maybe anticipating the benefits of a project that's nearly complete. But the trouble is that most people will often dwell on difficulties in the past, which can eventually lead to depression. Or people will constantly worry about the future, which can lead to chronic anxiety. So it follows that a technique that shifts your attention to focus more on the present moment will by default allow you to experience a greater sense of joy and well-being. So as an example, let's use this present moment. And I throw this out to the audience. Where are your thoughts right now in this moment? How many of you perhaps are still thinking about what you were doing just prior to this call? Or perhaps you're thinking about something you need to do later on. Point is, the mind can and does wander quickly. And that's okay. It's perfectly natural and it's normal. The mind wanders. That's what it does. And mindfulness is actually a tool that can be used to help you stay more present and focused in the moment. So here's a few images that reflect our current reality. Some of the things that we might be experiencing that can take our focus and our minds elsewhere. So, for example, trying to be present in a virtual meeting with constant interruptions from home. I've got my dogs here. Hopefully they're not going to bark any minute as someone walks by. Or listening to the news about, the pandemic, which, we tend to do on an ongoing basis. Or perhaps having to wait in those really long lines, trying to get anything that you need these days. With any one of these situations and many others, we can quickly take our minds elsewhere and start to experience some difficult emotions. So now I have 5 simple practices that I'd like to share with you today. So it's a lot to throw at you at once, particularly if you're unfamiliar with mindfulness practice. But hopefully 1 or 2 of these will resonate with you so that you can immediately use them and help to manage those thoughts and emotions, maybe even the ones that you're feeling right now. So the first is simply to focus your attention on the act of breathing. Sounds simple. The breath is our fundamental connection to life itself. Now, the first thing we do when we're born is inhale, and the last thing we'll do when we die is exhale. The breath, by its very nature, only exists in the present moment. And so it follows that by bringing awareness to the breath, we can more easily tune into what's happening here and now. And for this reason, breath awareness has always been a key aspect of many mindfulness practices. And in a sense, I guess you can think of the breath as your anchor to the present moment. A mindful breath practice, which is a type of focused attention practice, can be as simple as purposefully taking a long, slow inhale, a long, slow exhale, and paying attention to the sensations in your body as you breathe. So you can even try it with me now if you like. And I'd invite you to start by just making sure you're sitting comfortably. Close your eyes. Take a long, slow inhale through your nose. Long, slow exhale through the nose. Noticing how the body relaxes as you do this. And if you like, you can even place one hand on your belly and the other one on your chest to help bring even more attention and awareness to the breath. Repeat it a couple more times on your own. Just noticing the sensations as you breathe, how the body relaxes more deeply with each exhale. Just giving you a moment. Now, after this simple practice, most of you will probably feel a little calmer and more relaxed. This is the mindful breath practice. The next slide is a practice that builds on the power of the breath. It's called the stop practice, and it's used in times when you're experiencing very strong negative emotions. So the S, quite simply, stands for stop. Whenever you feel emotionally triggered, first just stop. Don't react. For just one moment, press pause. And if you can do this first step, you're most of the way there because you've consciously made a decision to come into the present moment. The T stands for take a breath. Pretty straightforward. You already know how to do that. Sometimes referred to as the sacred pause. Taking a breath also helps to emphasize that first step of just stopping. The O stands for observe. Observe your experience just as it is, without any judgment. Take time to notice where your thoughts have gone. Notice any emotions that are present, how they're being expressed in the body. Perhaps even observing others that are involved in the situation and consider their needs as well. And finally, the P stands for proceed. And this involves bringing to mind ways in which you might respond that would lead to a more positive outcome. So, although we don't have time to actually try this practice together today, which is something I like to do in these sessions, I can share from my own experience that it takes time to get it right and some perseverance. And sometimes I'm better at it than others, but in any case, the stop practice has always helped me to respond in better ways in these emotionally triggered situations. And as I said before, even just applying steps 1 and 2, pause in the moment, take a breath, these things can make all the difference in the world in terms of how you respond. Okay? So on to the next slide. One of the other important things to know about your brain is that it comes pre-programmed with something called a negativity bias. And this negativity bias is trained to keep us alive and always on the lookout for threats in the environment. Threats that for our ancestors, for example, it used to look like lions and tigers and bears. Today, they may look like masks on faces. And what we have to remember to ensure for our well-being is that it's our job to intentionally counter our brain's negativity bias by taking time to notice the good stuff. So as we go out in our communities, we can focus on the mask, we can allow it to fill us with frustration or fear about contracting COVID, or we can shift our focus upward towards the eyes and notice that the eyes are smiling, that there's a person behind the mask, and that we're all in this together, helping each other. The simple practice of noticing the good is one that you can use anywhere throughout the day. And I promise you that if you intentionally start looking for all the good stuff, you're going to instantly start to feel better. So this next slide is another practice you can try, which is called the acceptance practice. And it works like this. 9 simple words to help generate a little self-compassion. Repeat these words whenever you need them. I do my best. I let go of the rest. And what this does is it reminds you to let go of a situation, an emotion, an event, something that happened that you're not particularly proud or thrilled about. Maybe you got frustrated with your child or angry with your partner, upset with a colleague or a team member. Well, rather than ruminating about it and carrying it with you for the rest of the day or even longer, just remember, we're all human, we're trying to do our best in a very challenging situation. And that's truly more than enough. There's no sense in beating yourself up over something that's now history. I do my best, I let go of the rest. So it's your mantra now, and I encourage you to use it as you wish. So now, for the final practice I'm going to share with you today, we're going to use the image that we've got here on the screen as our guide. And it's one we can all relate to. This practice, called wishing others well, is a practice that helps to generate a sense of well-being and connection with others, something we could all use a little more of these days. So I like to use it while doing the COVID shuffle, as I call it, in a line like this one at the grocery store. So to do it, you begin by bringing your attention to the person at the front of the line, furthest away from you and closest to the entrance. Hold them briefly in your mind as someone you know and care about. And then mentally say to yourself, I wish you well. May you be healthy, happy, and free from harm. And you pause for a moment, allowing the words to sink in. Then you shift your attention to the next person in line and silently repeat, I wish you well. May you be healthy, happy, and free from harm. And you continue in this way until you reach the person who's just in front of you. And if you still haven't entered the store after wishing them well, then you can continue the process with the store clerk or with other customers leaving the store on the way to their car. Now, you don't even have to use these exact words. You might prefer, I hope you have a fantastic day because you deserve it. Whatever resonates. You just try wishing others well. As often as you can, notice how it makes you feel. Okay, so I've shared a few simple mindfulness practices, and here's my challenge to you today. Start by picking one activity that you do every day and just begin to do it mindfully. Give 100% of your attention to that activity. See what you notice. Use the moment to take a deep breath, become fully present. Could be during your morning coffee, when you're brushing your teeth, before you open your email, or even when you're out walking the dog. Just pick one activity and give it a try. Shouldn't require any more time because you're already doing it. The key is simply to bring more awareness to the activity as you do it. So, moving on to the final slide, I'm going to end here. I want to wrap up by thanking you all for your time today, and just letting you know that there are some additional resources and information available on my website, which is mindfulbreath.ca, including a couple of guided meditations for those of you who might be interested in adding a dedicated practice to your daily routine, which is something that I also highly encourage we all do for ourselves. So with that, it's been my honor, my privilege to share this little taste of mindfulness with you today. And it's my sincere wish that you and your loved ones are healthy, happy, free from harm. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Colin. I think even just listening to you, your tone of voice is very calming. So, but the content was even more rich. So thank you so much. We have a number of questions already. And folks, I remind you again, if you have a question, just click on the icon and you can ask it. Before we look at some of these questions, I want to check with you though. You mentioned a number of different practices. How often would you expect someone who is new to this to try and do it throughout the day? Is it like, twice a day, or how frequently would you see a person using these things?
Okay. Well, ideally, the whole thing with mindfulness is getting it to a state where you're not seeing it as something else you have to do. You're doing it in conjunction with what you normally do. So it becomes more of a change in how you do things, not adding something else. Now, the examples that I just gave you, those 5 little practices are what we like to call in the moment practices. So as the opportunity presents itself, you just do the activity, whatever it is, with a little mindfulness. You pay attention to the good things. You wish others well. When you're feeling a little frustrated. So those things you can do all the time. The other thing, which is a dedicated practice, is something a lot of people are doing now. And on my website, I've got 2 little practices. One, not surprisingly, is a mindful breath practice. And to start, it's like 3 minutes. It's a guided meditation using my voice. And this is the kind of thing that you can actually do. I'd encourage at least once a day. It could be in the morning when you get up, or in the evening before you go to bed. There's another one that's a little longer, which is called a body scan. Which again, the body only exists in the present moment. So that again is another way, when you bring attention to the body, to bring your attention to the present moment. So the combination of doing things as a in the moment practice as they come up throughout the day, and having a little dedicated practice in the morning as a reset button or a start to your day, these 2 things in combination, particularly if you have the commitment to run with it over the period of, say, a couple of weeks, you should immediately start to notice and the people around you should start to notice a change in your outlook, a change in, your resilience, how easily things bounce off you, and, your general state of being. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely encourage, start with 1 or 2 minutes of dedicated practice a day. And as you get comfortable, you can add more. And there's no reason why you can't build that to 10, 20, 30 minutes a day.
Perfect.
I was going to say, there's a wonderful book called Search Inside Yourself. A guy from Google wrote it. Pretty smart guy. And what I really liked about it was, to build on your point about, with my patients when they're asking about this, because we'll add it to it, we start with 2 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm.
And we just start with the process of 2 minutes. And as he said, we use breath. And then sometimes when I'm dealing with males, especially, they're, burly, big guys, when I'm talking with, they kind of sometimes look at me with their eyes crossed the first few minutes. And one of the things I tell them is that, when you flip on that switch, turn on the electricity, do you know how it works?
Mm-hmm.
They go, no. I said, but you just flip it on, right? They go, yeah.
Right.
So the cool thing about this is you don't have to understand the neuroplasticity of how this works in your brain. But I can assure you, with Colin said, there's more than enough people with pain, people that can learn how to do breath and actually pay attention and give 2 minutes a day. Incrementally, if you get up to 10 minutes a day, there's all kinds of research that shows the neuroplasticity benefits for people's quality of life. So this is not something you have to be sitting down, and you don't even have to do 10 minutes in a row. You can do 2 minutes here.
Totally.
It's an aggregate. It could actually has an accumulative benefit. So just
Totally.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, the key is just doing something to get started. And then once you get into that rhythm, you establish a habit. That's why you want to do it over the course of a couple of weeks. And then it'll just start taking it off on its own, like brushing your teeth. You don't think, oh, damn, I got to go brush my teeth. You just do it.
So guys, we have a lot of questions, so I want to speak to some of these here. There's questions around noise, and one person has said, I'm really good at doing mindfulness when I'm quiet, but as soon as I open my mouth, it goes away. And someone else was talking about noise also. Any recommendations in terms of how to address that?
Go ahead, Colin.
Okay, well, as far as this is again where the in the moment practices come up, because the reality is, a lot of people will sit down and do like a meditation, silence, and they don't want any disruptions around. And that's great when you're trying to get into a rhythm for yourself. But the key ultimately is to recognize that in all those distractions, in the chaos, if you will, you want to get to a point with practice where you can still ground yourself and focus your attention on the present moment. And again, it just really comes with practice. That's the key. The more you do it, the more proficient you become at it, and the less those distractions or the noise are going to take you off course. So again, that's the key, is don't worry about the noise, just recognize it's a practice. It's a practice, and just keep at it. Yeah,
I think like you say, like learning any skill, you're going to be building that muscle and that strength over time. There's some questions here around applications. So there's a lot of apps out there, and I wondered what your thoughts are. Some examples that people have given is one called Waking Up or Headspace. Do you have any view on some of the different apps that are out there in the market?
Yeah, apps are fantastic. Again, the real beauty of some of these things, I think it provides people with a vehicle for getting started. But ultimately, again, if you're in the middle of that line, for example, or you're stuck in traffic and you need to be able to, you recognize, okay, I'm starting to feel triggered here, I need to be more mindful. You don't want to be fumbling with an app. You want to get to a point where you become self-sufficient. So I would say use the app, use the technology as a way of getting you into that rhythm, getting you into the, okay, mindfulness, this is what it is. But what you don't want to do, I think, is start using it like a crutch, where the only time that you can do your quote unquote practice is when you're sitting down and listening to this thing. Because if you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you don't have an app, your phone just died, you still need to be able to be mindful. And, ultimately it comes back to you.
I agree. A facilitator. Use it as a facilitator.
Yeah.
So someone wrote in here a question, and it's a pretty practical one. It says, how would you handle others not wearing a mask with people right around you? So what would be a practical way to kind of apply some of these skills where you're feeling more exposed or at risk because they're not wearing a mask and you are?
I mean, I'm happy. I think, Colin, if you used your stop model, you could walk through that. The first thing is get your own composure under control, stop, take a breath yourself so you don't overreact, observe the situation where it is, get yourself your own personal space. And then you can be practical, because a part of the policies, and you being in HR, would be encouraging everyone under occupational health and safety. Don't assume they're being bad. They might have forgot it. They may not even realize they've had it. So
Right.
let's not assume people are actually trying to do things to upset you. Maybe your job is to serve them, to help them.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah,
application.
totally. I mean,
sorry, Colin.
So no, I was just going to say, I totally agree with that, Bill. That is part of mindfulness. In fact, is having no judgment and recognizing that a lot of times, our mind is sort of spinning off onto a certain track that isn't necessarily the way it really is. So you just have to, be able to let those things go.
And one point too, Peter, because this is going to be a really real example. Colin gave a really excellent point about we have a negative bias. So it's easy for our brain to go immediately to think they're doing something wrong with intention.
Yeah.
And if you can release that, and if they are basically, some psychological reactivity pushing against some social norms, that's what the organization has boundaries for and protocols and et cetera to deal with that. Because you're still OHS, you need to keep everyone else safe. And you're.
Yeah. So there's a question here, and I want to get through a couple more before we finish. What about the practice of expressing gratitude? I thought this was a huge part of mindfulness. So is there a connection there that you see between gratitude and mindfulness? And maybe that's part of that last exercise that you said in wishing people well, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, gratitude, again, is a big part of generating well-being. Personally, for yourself and for others, and it's very similar to wishing others well. It's very similar to the acceptance practice. For example, I do my best, I let go of the rest, and the more that you show gratitude, again, you are in a sense, you're recognizing the good thing about the fact that you're alive, you're breathing, you're in a situation, in a society where you benefit far more from so many good things that we have around us than, say, other parts of the world that are also in this COVID-19 thing, but perhaps they don't have the tools and the support that you have. So certainly having gratitude, again, is just another way of recognizing that.
Yeah, it's a very in the moment too. And it's very much to your point number 3 around notice the good, and it's helping you train your brain. What's interesting, when you start practicing gratitude, you actually start to see more positives. Mm-hmm. Other than when you're doing it intentionally, you just start noticing more.
Yeah.
There's a question here around, whether or not these principles can be applied to children. And if you have any thoughts, I think people could even be building off of the session we had last week. But in terms of teaching children to be able to use some of these mindfulness techniques.
Yeah, I've had all kinds of success when I used to do a lot of children stuff around breathing with young folks. Also around being grateful for what they have, and by learning to say thank you and appreciating it. However, also not always wanting to have all the toys, and being happy that someone else is having time, and teaching them to observe other people having fun. So, and being able to be happy that, hey, you have 15 minutes left on the video, so instead of sitting there storming, sit and observe how much fun your brother's having for their 15 minutes.
Right. Totally. In fact, it's interesting you should make that comment about teaching children about mindfulness, because the way I like to look at it is that I think children actually have a lot they teach us. Because if you want to look at somebody who really is an expert at living in the moment, look to a really young child. They don't have those distractions about the past and the future. They're totally dialed in. So what I've found, because I have done some work as well with underprivileged youth in our community, is that children in particular, they get this stuff. They just know it. So, you know, when you start going through things like wishing others well and things like that, it resonates with them immediately.
That's fantastic. Unfortunately, we're out of our time already, but folks, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I think we have a lot of really helpful techniques that were presented, and we will be sending out the materials so you're able to get a copy of them. Colin, a huge thank you for being with us today and for what you've shared. Really appreciate it. Dr. Howard, always thank you for joining us. And everyone, I wish you a great day and a great week. Thank you.
Enjoy.
Okay.